In our gospel reading today, we hear Luke's version of what we have come to call the Beatitudes, the series of blessings Jesus speaks at the beginning of his Sermon on the Mount in the gospel according to Matthew. But importantly, in Luke's version, there is no mount, only a level place, signaling from the very start that our sense of perspective is being challenged here. What is up? What is down? In Matthew's gospel, Jesus speaks 9 blessings, but in Luke, he speaks only 4 before proceeding on to a series of woes, in which he condemns those people whose values are upside down from those who Jesus says are blessed: the poor, the hungry, the grief-stricken, the excluded. The poor that Jesus blesses in Matthew are poor in spirit, but in Luke, they are simply poor, hungry, and weeping, and surrounded by opportunists and false prophets. From the very beginning of Luke's gospel, we read of a world being turned upside down, or rather of one being turned right side up again, and one that seems disarmingly contemporary amid the sweeping political changes of ours. We might even wonder, given our context, if the Beatitudes are next in line to be struck down as too woke or too liberal, promoting equity, fairness, and inclusion as they do. In this gospel passage, there is a great multitude of people surrounding Jesus, gathered on a plain, a level place, and Jesus stands with them. They have sought him out, come to hear him and to be healed, seeking to touch him, for power came out from him. And if we pay attention to the directionality of the passage, we might also hear that not only was Jesus with them in a level place, but perhaps even lower than them. For before he began his blessings, Luke tells us, Jesus looked up and then began to say to his disciples, "Blessed are the poor, the hungry, the outsiders, those who weep." Jesus is the lowest figure in this composition, which ought to make us wonder again not only what is up and what is down, but also who. The only Son of God is not teaching from above here, but very much the opposite, lifting up the lowly from below. But then, perhaps this should come as no surprise, for before he ever stood in the synagogue proclaiming he was the fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy of release for the captive and good news to the poor, he was first Mary's son. Mary, who Luke also tells us, saying of God's mercy, how God had scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts, brought down the powerful from their thrones, and lifted up the lowly, filled the hungry with good things, and sent the rich away empty. Perhaps Luke intends for us to hear echoes of the Magnificat, Mary's triumphant and revolutionary song, in her Son's blessing of the poor and the hungry and the outcast. His woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, for you will be hungry. Turns out, turning the world upside down or right side up again ran in the family. After all, the God who Mary called the Mighty One and Jesus called Abba was not content to look down upon creation from above, but through the very Incarnation to work from below, on earth as it is in heaven, where heaven is not up, but all around, a level place, or ought to be. It has been said that the first Christians turned the world upside down, but if they did, it was only because they paid heed to Jesus' teaching and example, to the way that the cross, that cruciform instrument that turned the world right side up again, forever changed our understandings of what is up and what is down. While our praise and thanksgiving should rightly ascend vertically because grace incarnate descended on the cross for us, that thankfulness ought to be practiced horizontally in love and concern for each other, for the lowly, for our neighbor, the stranger, the vulnerable, and yes, even those who hate us. The world-turning frame of the Beatitudes surely seemed as foolish and far off and upside down to the world of those gathered around Jesus in the passage we hear from Luke as it does to our ears here and now. The prophet's words, Mary's song, Jesus' teaching, all promising God's favor, heavenly righteousness and justice, kingdom happiness to the poor, the troubled, the oppressed. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh, the great turner of worlds proclaims. And I want to say, tell me when, sweet Jesus, tell me when. Because I am tired of weeping, and I think we are all tired of weeping. I don't know about you, but I haven't seen the rich going away empty much these past few weeks. In fact, just the opposite. The rich unilaterally taking away funding to help the poorest of the poor, defunding humanitarian aid and attacking the church for that very work, and all the while the rich benefiting from government contracts and grift, profiting on the backs of others. Meanwhile, we tell ourselves that the world will be different when we get to heaven. The gospel even says so. Rejoice in that day when people hate you and exclude you and revile you and defame you on account of the Son of Man. For surely your reward is great in heaven. Everything will be right side up then and there, except Jesus pulls the ladder out from under us and tells us, no, don't look up. First, look around. He gives us instead a different ladder in the Beatitudes, each blessing a rung to bring about the level plane where heaven isn't up but horizontal. Step by step, we bring about the kingdom by practicing love of God, by loving our neighbor, doing justice, walking humbly. Because the world isn't right until we're all right. I've said it before and I'll say it again. We need God, and we need each other. Jesus forever changed the axis of salvation completely, making our stairway to heaven horizontal, leveling the field. The smirking behavior of the false prophets and the rich displayed in the Beatitudes and in our world underscore that the image of ever climbing up a vertical ladder and the goal of being the one on top requires that the power-hungry climber keep their eyes always focused on the next rung, despite the danger of stepping on each other's hands. When what Jesus is saying is that we ought always to be reaching out to those below us, or those who have been pushed aside because there's so many trying to get to the top, whatever the cost. We are all looking for heaven, for God's peace and justice and righteousness. But what if none of this is as up as we thought, but more of a level place and all around us? Beware of false prophets. The way to heaven, Jesus says, is horizontal, an ever-expanding circle where we stand with each other and for each other and make sure there is room for everyone. And when we do that, my friends, Jesus will surely look up and say, "Blessed are you. Blessed are you."